The wind came out of the north that morning, thick with the scent of mesquite and dust, curling like a whisper through the sagebrush, as if it carried a secret meant only for those listening close. It stirred the hem of her dress and plucked at the brim of his hat, but neither of them moved to speak. She stood just outside the clapboard depot, hands knotted in front of her like a woman in mourning, though her black dress was born more of necessity than grief. Dust clung to her hem, her boots were cracked at the sides, and her eyes, green-gray and dulled from a stretch of hard years, never quite settled on anything, as though the world itself had betrayed her and she hadn't yet decided whether to forgive it. He saw her before she saw him, watched as she tried not to fidget beneath the stares of rough ranch hands and loitering drunks who watched women like her the way starving men might watch a flame-lit kitchen window. She didn't notice them, or maybe she did and didn't care anymore. The telegram in his coat pocket had been plain: Eliza Bell, widow, bound for Oregon Territory. Escort required from Abilene West to Fort Boise, paid in full. Boone Calder didn't ask questions where money was already laid down. But now, watching her, slight, quiet, but standing like she was made of wire and flint, he knew this ride wouldn't be simple. He stepped from the shade, boots silent in the dust. Mrs. Bell. She turned then, and he saw the sharp line of her jaw and the cautious flicker in her eyes that told him she was sizing him up too. He tipped his hat. Name, Boone, I'm to see you west. She nodded once, like a woman who'd used up all her words early in life and didn't want to waste the few she had left. I'm ready, she said. Her voice was low, dry as the prairie, but clear. She looked past him at the waiting horses, then back. You ride fast. I ride steady, he answered. They didn't speak much that first day. She rode with the stiffness of someone who hadn't been in a saddle in years but refused to complain about it. He offered her jerky at midday, and she took it wordlessly, chewing with the patience of someone who didn't expect anything better. They camped that night by the Cimarron, and she laid her blanket down a fair distance from his without asking. He built the fire. She boiled coffee. When the stars came out, they kept to their own corners of the silence like two ghosts sharing a burial ground. Boone was used to solitude, preferred it most days. But there was something about the way she watched the fire, not seeking warmth, but studying the flame like it might speak back if she stared hard enough, that made him feel like maybe she'd been alone even longer than he had. 2 days in, they were caught in a dust storm that came roaring out of the west without warning. Boone shouted for her to cover her mouth and keep low. She didn't cry out, didn't flinch, just wrapped a scarf over her face and followed him behind a rise of rock where they waited the storm out in choking silence. Afterward, her face was streaked with grit, her eyes red-rimmed, but she didn't curse or cry. She only said, "That wind," it sounded like something screaming. Boone didn't answer. He didn't have to, she wasn't asking. Each mile west peeled something back between them, though neither reached to touch the other's scars. He learned she didn't sleep easily, heard her shift and sit up in the dark, her breath ragged like she'd just surfaced from drowning. Once, in Kansas Territory, he woke to find her standing at the edge of camp, watching the moon. He didn't speak her name, only rose and stood near her, letting the night hold their words. There were 2 of them, she said then, almost inaudible. My boys. Boone didn't ask where they were now. The silence after her words was too thick, too heavy with the weight of graves. I'm sorry, was all he said. She didn't thank him. They passed through Dodge and Great Bend without staying long. News on the trail turned colder. Rumors of sickness up near the Platte, talk of raiders moving down from the hills, wagons burned and travelers robbed. Boone kept his rifle close and her horse tethered near his. She never questioned his decisions, only watched him with those watchful eyes and rode wherever he told her. But she was changing. He saw it in small things, the way she steadied her mount without needing help, the way she watched the sky before storms. Once, when he was bitten by a snake and had to cauterize the wound, she didn't flinch or look away, held his belt between his teeth and poured the burning liquor steady as stone. When the fever broke and he came to, she was there, pressing a damp cloth to his brow. Her hands were shaking, her eyes were not. You stayed, he murmured. You would have done the same. He didn't answer, he didn't know if it was true. As spring bled into summer, and the grasslands gave way to red earth and bluffs and winding canyons, the space between them shrank. Not in words, they still didn't speak much, but in the way they moved. She began riding beside him instead of behind. They set up camp together. She started asking questions: how to read the stars, how to know when water was bad, what animals left which tracks. And Boone, who'd thought of her at first as freight to be delivered, began to wonder what it would cost him to let her go once they reached Oregon. Began to watch the shape of her mouth when she smiled at something quiet, like the morning frost melting off pine needles. Began to see that in her silence there was not emptiness, but something waiting to be known. She never told him what she'd lost. He never asked again. But each night they sat closer to the fire, and each day he found himself looking back more often to be sure she was still behind him. This was only the beginning. There were still rivers to cross, mountains to climb, men to face, and neither of them yet knew what waited beyond the pass. But Boone felt it already, that slow, steady pull between them. He'd been meant to escort her west. But with every mile, she was escorting him somewhere too. They came upon the remains of a wagon outside La Junta, broken open like a ribcage, its canvas fluttering in the wind like a shroud. The air was sour with the stink of old blood, and flies swarmed thick around the bones of what once might have been a mule. Eliza dismounted before Boone could stop her, stepping slow among the wreckage. He followed, rifle drawn. "Don't touch anything," he said low. "I'm not a fool," she replied, though her voice held no heat, just weariness. She crouched near the scatter of belongings, splintered crates, a child's doll with its face worn half away, a bonnet soaked brown. "This was recent," she said. Boone didn't answer. His eyes traced the tracks leading away from the scene, men on horseback, at least 5 heavy boot prints around the wagon's edge. He knelt and touched the ground. They rode off east, maybe a day ahead. Eliza stood. Will they come back? He looked at her then, the brim of his hat shadowing his face. They already took what they wanted. Her eyes went flinty. You don't know that. He didn't argue. Instead, he checked his revolver, watched the sun lean toward its western arc. We'll ride harder. That night they camped in a dry ravine, their fire small, masked by a circle of rocks. Boone sat with his back to the stone, rifle across his knees, while Eliza doled out cold beans from a tin. She passed his portion in silence, then settled beside him, both of them watching the darkness stretch out its long fingers. "You ever think about stopping?" she asked, just turning back. He chewed slow. "Stopping don't make the land any softer." She turned the tin in her hands. "No, I reckon it doesn't." Later he woke to the sound of footsteps, light, purposeful. He reached for his gun but paused when he saw it was her, pacing the edge of camp, her face turned to the stars. He sat up. "Can't sleep." Eliza stopped, one hand clenched in her shawl. "I used to walk when the babies wouldn't settle, put 'em in a sling and pace the floor till their breathing slowed. It helped me too." She laughed barely. "Funny what sticks. I ain't carried them in years." Boone said nothing. What comfort could words be, when the ones she loved had been carried away by death, not by time? She came back to the fire and sat cross-legged, her hair loosed from its braid. "I had a husband once, John. He worked leather, quiet man, loved the boys more than breath." She stared into the coals, shoulders hunched. "He died of fever the same winter we lost the farm. After that, I learned how little the world gives a widow with 2 mouths to feed." Boone stirred the fire, feeding in a pine bough. "You got them to Oregon." "I buried them in Missouri." Her voice cracked like frost underfoot. "A cholera camp. I held 'em both, but they went anyway, like falling asleep, just slower." The flames danced between them. She didn't cry. Boone didn't look away. "I'm not going west to start over," she said, calmer now. "I'm going west because there's nothing left to go back to." He nodded, slow. "Then we keep riding." In the morning they broke camp early. Eliza no longer waited for his word. She saddled her mare, cinched her bedroll, her movements crisp and practiced. Boone watched her with a kind of quiet respect that edged into something deeper, something he didn't yet name. By mid-afternoon, the landscape shifted, pinyon pines rising out of sandstone, the horizon stretching in layers of red and gold. They rode through old Ute land, the silence of it vast and clean. Eliza said, "Feels like riding through a prayer." Boone smiled without showing teeth, not sure who's listening. She glanced sideways, still worth saying. They reached a trading post near Del Norte 2 days later, a place run by a grizzled Frenchman and his half-Apache wife. The woman eyed Eliza with a wary kindness, then offered her bread fresh from the coals. Boone bartered for ammunition and coffee, and when he returned, he found Eliza sitting with the trader's wife, both women silent, sewing by the open doorway. There was a gentleness in Eliza's face he hadn't seen before, like a muscle unclenching. The next morning, the Frenchman pulled Boone aside. "You take care," he said in broken English, jerking his chin toward the road west. "Trouble out there, bandits, white men who play Injun take what they want. They hunt soft travelers." Boone nodded. "She ain't soft." The man squinted. "Still, she your woman." Boone's answer came without pause. "Not yet." The trail after that grew steeper, more remote. They crossed the San Juans, snow still clinging in pockets, and for 3 days they saw no other soul. Then, near Pagosa Springs, they found a boy, a mud of a thing, rail-thin, face smeared with dirt and soot. He'd been hiding beneath a felled tree, a makeshift snare on his ankle and a stone clutched in his hand like a weapon. Eliza dropped to her knees, her voice soft. "You hurt." He didn't answer, just stared at them like a wild thing cornered. Boone stepped back, let her handle it. She coaxed the boy out slow, fed him dried apple and unwrapped the crude bandage on his leg. "Name's Jesse," he mumbled finally. "My ma, she's gone." Eliza didn't press. She just held the boy close for a long while, and Boone saw something change in her again, something deepening. She wasn't just remembering love, she was offering it. They kept Jesse with them. He rode double behind Eliza, silent most days, but sleeping sound when she was near. Boone taught him how to notch arrows and recognize scat. Eliza taught him how to braid rope and boil clean water. That night Jesse curled beside the fire, wrapped in one of Boone's old coats. Boone leaned back against his saddle, eyes on the stars. "You think we'll keep him?" he asked. Eliza looked over at the boy. "I think he's already decided." Boone turned his gaze to her. The fire cast a soft light on her cheekbones, her windruff lips. She caught him watching and didn't look away. "You still think I'm freight to be delivered?" she asked. "No," he said. "I think you're the reason I ain't turned back." A long silence settled between them, but this time it felt like peace, like home, unfolding slow and unexpected. They hadn't yet reached Oregon, but the journey was no longer about the end. It was about what they were becoming, mile by mile. And neither one of them was riding alone. The storm came down from the Tetons in the dead of night, sudden and violent, like a punishment long withheld. Rain lashed the earth with a fury that turned dirt to mire and drowned out even the crackle of their fire. Lightning split the sky so close Boone could smell the ozone, sharp and metallic like burnt pennies. He shouted for Eliza and Jesse, who had bedded down beneath a lean-to of pine boughs, and in moments they were all up, scrambling to secure the horses, gear, and what little warmth they'd built. They rode out the worst of it huddled beneath a rocky overhang, slick with runoff, the horses stamping and nervous behind them. Jesse trembled in Eliza's arms, and she held him with both arms wrapped tight, her mouth near his ear, whispering whatever comfort she could find. Boone stood at the edge, water running down his coat, rifle ready, eyes on the dark ridge above. He hadn't seen signs of other riders in days, but something about the storm made his skin crawl. Come morning, the sky had emptied itself, and what remained was a world rinsed clean, sharp with pine, heavy with fog. The firewood was soaked, but Boone coaxed a flame from the driest scrap. Eliza wrung out her dress and combed Jesse's hair with her fingers. The boy clung to her now with a fierceness Boone recognized. Not fear exactly, but a kind of desperation not to be let go again. Later Boone went scouting alone, promising to circle back by dusk. The mountains ahead grew steeper, the trail narrower. He saw signs of old paths, deer prints, scat, and at one bend, a fresh campfire, ashes still warm. He crouched low, fingers brushing the embers, then turned fast at the sound of movement behind him. A man stood there, rifle lowered but eyes wary. Dressed in patched wool, beard thick and gray. He didn't smile. "You alone?" the man asked. Boone didn't answer. He saw 2 more men behind him, half hidden in the trees. "We're just passing through," Boone said. The man looked him over. "You're not one of them McKinnon boys?" "No." The man nodded slow. "Good. They're the reason folks go missing up here," he spat. 5 of 'em, ride like wolves, meaner'n fire, took a wagon party 2 weeks ago. Woman with a baby, nothing left but blood and wood chips. Boone's jaw clenched. He didn't ask if they'd been caught. he could guess. "Mind your trail," the man added, "and if you see smoke in the canyons, turn back." Boone rode hard back to camp, told Eliza what he'd heard. She listened, jaw set. "Could be lies," she said. "Could be truth." She looked toward the mountains, where mist coiled like ghosts through the pines. "We keep going." Boone didn't argue. The next day they crossed a narrow pass where the wind howled like something grieving. Jesse walked now, his mare limping from a split hoof. Boone carried extra gear, his own shoulders aching beneath the weight, but he said nothing. Eliza pulled Jesse's hand into hers and didn't let go the whole climb. That night they reached a high valley, the grass lush and wildflowers blooming despite the chill. Boone set up camp while Eliza taught Jesse how to whistle with a blade of grass. The sound made him laugh, high and clean and surprising. Boone looked over and found Eliza watching him. "What?" he asked. She shook her head, soft smile curving her lips. "You looked young just then." He chuckled dry in his throat. "That's a lie." "No, it's what I remember a man looking, like before grief took everything sharp." He met her eyes across the firelight. "And what do I look like now?" She didn't flinch, like a man who's learning how to live again. The words sat between them like a promise not yet made. 2 days later they reached the edge of a burned-out settlement. Smoke still lingered, faint but acrid. Charred beams jutted from the earth like blackened ribs. Jesse's hand tightened in Eliza. Boone walked ahead, slow, rifle ready. Among the ruins they found signs, footprints, drag marks, a blood trail that led toward the hills. Eliza crouched beside a broken pot, her face unreadable. Boone touched her shoulder. "We should move on." She nodded but didn't rise. "I've seen this before," she said. "When raiders came through Missouri, they don't take everything unless they're starvin' or sendin' a message." Boone looked down at her, at the way she sat still as stone. "What message?" She stood slowly, that no one's safe, not even the ones who run. That night they took turns keeping watch. Boone's shift passed in silence, except for the call of a nightbird and Jesse's soft snores. When Eliza rose to take her turn, Boone didn't sleep. He watched her circle the camp's edge, slow and watchful, moonlight catching the streaks of silver in her hair. She was not young, but she was something rarer, strong in the way riverbeds are strong, shaped by time, by loss, by everything they carry but do not surrender to. Just before dawn, she came to where he lay and sat beside him. "I should be scared," she whispered, "but I'm not." Boone opened his eyes. "Why not?" "Because for the first time, I trust the man ridden beside me." Boone said nothing, but in the hush that followed, he reached out and took her hand. They did not kiss, they did not need to. In that moment, they belonged. When morning came, they packed up and rode north, toward the Columbia Basin, toward what waited. Whatever danger lay ahead, they would face it together. And though they never spoke the word aloud, they knew it now. This was more than a journey. It was the making of something they'd thought forever lost. Something like home. The desert bloomed beneath a sky the color of old denim, wide and merciless, the air brittle with heat. Dust clung to every inch of them, turning skin to parchment and eyes to slits. The road westward through the Snake River plain was unkind, its water scarce, its shade scarcer. But Boone, Eliza, and Jesse pressed on, each day etched into their bodies like a slow carving of stone. Jesse no longer rode behind her. Boone had traded for a small mule in a roadside town called Dry Hollow, paying more than he should have, but watching Jesse sit proud in that saddle made it worth every coin. The boy had changed, still quiet, but steadier now, with a knife on his belt and the sun in his face. He whistled sometimes, not out of habit, but because he wanted to. Boone rode ahead most days, keeping the path clear, scanning the horizon for danger. Eliza stayed near Jesse, teaching him how to read the clouds, how to know when the earth was lying about water. Her voice had grown stronger, her eyes sharper. She wore a revolver now, low on her hip, and she used it when she had to. They encountered the McKinnons 2 weeks, past the last trading post. It happened in a canyon outside Fort Hall, the walls rising high and red around them, the air dead still. Boone had scouted ahead and saw the glint first, metal catching light from a ridge. He turned back, fast and low, motioning them off the trail into a dry wash thick with brush. Eliza didn't ask questions. Jesse followed her lead. Boone crouched beside them. Riders, he murmured. At least 4 might be them. Eliza drew her revolver. Jesse didn't cry or tremble. He looked up at Boone, jaw clenched. What do we do? Boone looked at the boy, then the woman beside him, and something hard settled in his gut. We wait. The sun slid toward its decline. Shadows stretched long. The riders passed slow above them, talking low, rifles slung across their backs. Boone didn't breathe until the last one vanished over the ridge. They moved on at dusk, silent but fast, skirting the river and doubling back north to lose any trail. That night they made camp without fire. Jesse slept against Eliza's side, and Boone sat awake, rifle across his lap, every muscle strung tight. Near midnight she joined him. Her face was shadowed, her eyes wide in the moonlight. I thought I was past fear, she said. Turns out I just forgot what it felt like. Boone didn't look at her. Fear keeps you alive. Eliza studied him. And what keeps you human? He didn't answer. After a long silence, she spoke again. You ever think about what we do when we get there? He did, though he hadn't said it aloud. He thought of a small cabin, rough but warm, of Jesse running through grass instead of stone, of Eliza's laugh, real and unguarded, in a place where no one needed guns to sleep. I think about it, he said, not sure I believe it. She nodded, me neither, but I want to. And there it was, not a promise, not yet, but a seed. In the days that followed, the land grew greener. Hills rolled like folded cloth. They saw antelope in the distance, watched hawks circle overhead. The worst of the journey seemed behind them. Then they came upon the body. It was near a bend in the Clearwater River, where the water twisted fast around a bend of white stone. A man lay sprawled in the grass, throat opened clean, face sunburnt and slack. His horse was gone. His coat was marked with the crest Boone had seen described by the Frenchman weeks back. A circle of thorns burned into the leather. McKinnon. Eliza stared down at him. You think he died fighting? Boone crouched, turned the man's hand over. No, he died running. They buried the man under a juniper tree. Jesse helped dig, silent but sure. Boone said no words over the grave, just looked once at the horizon and then turned back to the trail. The next evening, they camped beside a cold creek lined with tall grass and birch trees. The air was sweet with the scent of mint and wet stone. Jesse caught 2 trout with a snare Boone had taught him to tie, and Eliza cooked them crisp over the coals. They ate in quiet satisfaction, the kind earned only by miles and hunger. Later, Boone found Eliza sitting with her feet in the stream, skirt hitched above her knees, the moonlight painting her skin silver. You ever think you'd come this far? He asked, standing just at the edge. She shook her head. I didn't think I'd make it out of Missouri. Boone stepped closer, slow. I didn't think I'd care about anything again. Eliza looked up at him, and now. He knelt beside her. Now I'd kill to keep you safe, and not just from McKinnon. Her hand found his, rough and warm. That ain't love, she said softly. No, he agreed, but it's how it starts. She leaned against him then, the quiet wrapping around them like a quilt. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. They had said enough for now. And far off in the night, a wolf howled, not in menace but in memory. They were close to Oregon now. The trees changed, the air wet with the scent of salt. Boone knew the land by feel. He'd been here once long ago, before grief made him hollow. He recognized the river bends, the way the mist hung low. But everything looked different with her beside him. Jesse rode ahead that day, hair tangled in the wind, and Eliza looked over at Boone. We're almost there, she said. He didn't smile, but he took her hand. Yes, he said, but we were becoming something long before this. The land softened as they descended into the Willamette Valley, the air thick with fir and cedar, the scent of rain in the soil. Where once there had been only dust and hardship, now there were fields waiting to be sown, streams clear enough to drink without boiling, and cabins spaced far enough to keep your soul intact, close enough to know your neighbor's name if you wanted to. Boone slowed his horse as they crested the final ridge, letting Eliza and Jesse take it in before he spoke. The valley below stretched wide and green, patches of wildflowers blooming along the hillsides, smoke rising from chimney stacks in the distance. Jesse sat up straighter, eyes round. It's real, he said. Eliza didn't speak at first. She stared at it like she was waiting to wake from some long, fevered dream. Then she nodded, just once, and the corners of her mouth twitched like she might smile if it didn't hurt so much to believe in something again. They reached the edge of a settlement called Morgan's Rest by nightfall, a scattering of homes, a schoolhouse, a church with a crooked steeple. Boone handed his name to a man keeping a dusty ledger. The man nodded, asked no questions, and pointed them toward a small cabin north of the creek, abandoned by its last tenant but still standing firm. Eliza walked the floorboards in silence, ran her hand along the rough-hewn table, the empty hearth. Jessie claimed the cot by the window with a sort of reverence, as if staking a claim to a new name, a new start. Boone watched it all from the door, not yet stepping inside. "Do you think this could be enough?" Eliza asked him later, standing by the fire he built with trembling hands. Boone looked around, then at her. "If it ain't, nothing is." There was no ceremony to what happened next. No grand declarations. Just a night spent close, her back to his chest, his hand curled over hers, the dark holding them gentle as the arms of someone who'd waited a long time to welcome them home. Weeks passed. Boone worked the land, clearing brush, fixing fence, trading his strength for seed and lumber. Eliza took in laundry, taught the neighbors' girls how to sew, made a place for Jesse in the school despite his wild past. Slowly, people learned their names, respected their silences. The town had seen its share of pain, runaways from war, widows with hollow eyes, men broken by the trail. No one asked too many questions. Boone built her a porch. He didn't say it was for watching the rain, though she did. He didn't say it was for holding her hand when the storms rolled through, though he did that too. One morning, Eliza found a book left on the step, a dog-eared volume of poetry from someone she'd never met. Inside, a note scrawled, "For the woman who walks like she's known fire and came out singing." She didn't cry, not where Jesse could see, but Boone held her after dark and felt the way her shoulders shook beneath his hands. Then came the news. A rider, bloodied and pale, brought word from the east. The McKinnons had followed, took a trail party south of the Columbia. Rumor said they were headed west again, through the coastal range, bold with no law on their heels. Boone saddled up before dawn. "I'm going," he told her. Eliza stood at the doorway, hair loose, rifle slung over one shoulder. "Not without me." He didn't argue. Jesse stayed with the schoolmaster's wife, reluctant but brave. They rode hard, cutting across wild country, following signs only Boone could read. He saw them before they were seen, 4 men around a campfire in a gully, laughing loud, careless with the silence. It wasn't vengeance he wanted. It was an ending. They waited till dusk. Eliza took position on the ridge. Boone moved in close, quiet as smoke. When the first shot rang out, it was hers. Boone followed, rifle steady, eyes calm. It was over before they could scream. Afterward, she knelt beside the last man, eyes hard. "You remember me?" she asked. He coughed, blood bubbling. "No." She didn't speak again, just stood and walked away. Boone lit the fire that burned their camp. It lit the canyon like a funeral pyre. They didn't look back. By the time they returned, the valley was greening with the first true signs of spring. The orchard down the hill bloomed white. Jesse ran to them, arms flung wide, and Eliza caught him like she was catching her breath. That night Boone carved a small wooden sparrow and set it on the windowsill. "For the ones we lost," he said. "And the ones we keep," she replied. They didn't marry, not formally, but she wore his shirt in the mornings, and he built her a rocking chair, and Jesse called him Pa without ever being asked. They planted potatoes, they built a barn, they stayed. And some nights, when the moon rose clear and the trees whispered in the dark, Boone would watch her cross the yard, barefoot, lantern in hand, and know that in all his long years wandering, he had never found anything as sacred as the quiet sound of her feet on that soil. He had meant only to escort her west, but every mile had brought them closer. Not to a destination, but to each other.